Markus, I have a couple of questions for you. You spoke about green hydrogen and how it will drive stainless steel. And I'm a newborn aficionado of green hydrogen, layman to the energy world, but very intrigued. Back in Germany, you have pipelines which are ready to take hydrogen from day one. For a country like India, which is yet to start the supply chain, for the stainless steel industry, it's a huge opportunity. Right? There was a recent report which said that if India maps the green hydrogen journey well, we could be producing 5 Saudi Aramcos.
5 what?
5 Saudi Aramcos in India, if we are able to map it well. Right? But the critical part is the supply chain, the pipelines, the storage, the distribution, and the stainless steel connectivity to it. How do you think the Indian industry needs to prepare to leverage that demand?
Well, hydrogen and stainless, that will become very important. And when you say green hydrogen, that is a distant future thing. At the moment, green hydrogen is peanuts. It's absolutely, so there will be gray, blue, and all other colors for a long time before green will be the major form. And it's all about cost. And when one thing that you mentioned, the infrastructure, the pipelines, this is very important. You can, in most cases, use other gas pipelines also for hydrogen. First, people thought with the hydrogen embrittlement, this will not be the case. You have to build a new network. It's not true. But stainless steel is virtually not used in the pipelines. Don't get me wrong. The pipelines are carbon steel. Stainless steel is used in the production of hydrogen, whether it is with an electrolyzer for green, and here you have a lot of stainless steel, heat exchanger, then also the so-called cold box, where you, for the liquefaction of gas and so on. So here you have a lot of stainless and even nickel alloys in there. But the main process that's used today is the so-called SMR units, which are, it's not my company, it's the same name, where you produce it from gas, actually, and here you need stainless steel. Then for the transport, whether it is pipeline, the pipeline's not, but at the front end and back end of the pipeline you have stainless steel. Then if you transport it by truck, you have stainless steel, and then where you store it, you have stainless. So you asked me about the strategy for India. India should do something like similar Rotterdam in Europe. Rotterdam will become the major receiving and departing hub because we are planning to import a lot of hydrogen from countries like Saudi Arabia, which is just building now the biggest electrolyzer in the world, but also Northern Africa, etc. Because in order to produce green hydrogen, you need green electricity. You don't have that in India yet. And you cannot build, there the sun shines all the time, in Saudi Arabia and things, and in the north we have the windmills. And hydrogen has the wonderful ability to buffer out, to store electricity, basically. Because when you have too much wind and sun, produce hydrogen, and on the consumption side you have a stable consumption, and this can be transported, it can be also stored. Not easy, but it can. So this is why it will become such an important technology in the future. And I think what the government has to do is you have to create some clusters and some champions here, and the companies are already there. Like in Europe it is Linde Gases, Praxair, Air Liquide, these gas companies, which are also in India, but maybe you have some Indian gas companies as well. I'm not too familiar with that here. And they should be at the forefront of the development and everything. And it needs subsidies, that's clear. As unfortunately the whole world, or the whole industry does no longer work, obviously, without any subsidies. And since there is a competition globally about that, the Indian government also has to make some money for that, So, yep.
Okay, so now Marcus, connected to that, the way I see the markets around hydrogen, I'll drop the word green for the moment. Yes, you said it's a bit far in the distance. You know, Europe is looking at itself as a consumer, but doesn't want to become a producer. So the Rotterdam strategy of becoming a storage and distribution hub for hydrogen is partly because they are in a prime position with a good port infrastructure, and partly because Europe does not want to produce. They're saying that we are happy to import and consume, right? So that is one side of it. Yes, Tim?
Yeah, could I just add something to that? Because recently Germany have announced a hydrogen strategy. So they will begin to produce hydrogen in the not too distant future. So there are some changes occurring within Europe.
Oh, okay.
But that's very sort of recent additions. So the whole, as you rightly said, is more focused on imports.
Yeah.
But just one other point to add to what Marcus said. The incoming water supply for electrolysis will need stainless steel as well, because the water needed has to be deionized first before the appropriate electrolytes are added to allow electrolysis to successfully occur. So that process demands stainless, and that's a significant amount of stainless. It's about 150 tons per gigawatt of electrolysis capacity. So just for the water containment on the incoming side. So that's significant when you multiply that up. And I think that's an important consideration too.
It is. So, and thank you for bringing that up, Tim. So what I was wanting to add to that was, so Europe wants to import because it doesn't want to produce as of now, but I'm glad if they're making that shift. Saudi.
I need to correct you.
Yeah.
It's not that we don't want to produce,
yeah,
but the costs are too high in Europe compared to North Africa or Middle East. We want to, but at the end of the day, these things, either you subsidize them forever, which cannot be the target, or the lowest cost producer will win the race, you know, so that's it.
Now, you mentioned Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia wants to produce hydrogen not to consume, but to offset its oil carbon. Fine. Now, you come to India. India is something which is wanting to go on the energy resilience path. That, you know, I want to cut down my oil import bills. Can I produce hydrogen? I cannot produce oil, but can I produce hydrogen? Right? So the economic situation here around hydrogen would be very different from. I personally see a lot of opportunity in storage and smaller size distribution coming up for my friends here in the room. Have you seen any similar model in any other geography? That is what that was my actual question. Anybody who's producing smaller pockets, you mentioned zones, so the government has laid out a strategy. There are 10 clusters being developed so that there's an equitable distribution.
In Germany, primarily on the eastern side of Germany, there's a project called the HYPOS project, which is developing the storage and distribution for hydrogen for industries that will use hydrogen. And in their early assessment, 50% of the need will be for small users. So the storage and distribution will most likely move to liquid hydrogen rather than low pressure or high pressure gas transport of hydrogen. And I think that model is worth following. Because it's a very interesting sort of split between the large-scale consumers of hydrogen and the much smaller scale, which are currently suggested to be about 50% of the total demand.
Yeah. So I think it's a similar model that we're following here.
Yes.
A big chunk is again coming from the traditional offset sectors like fertilizer, hydrocarbon.
Yeah.
You know. Thank you.
Could I just add something on hydrogen production?
Yes, please.
Though I recently joined a webinar on a technology, an electrolysis technology called ETAC, E-T-A-C, which is being developed in Israel at the moment. And this is a two-stage electrolysis of water with no membrane, unlike the polymer electrolytic membrane system. And the early outcomes of this is that it is 30% cheaper in terms of capex and about 35% cheaper in terms of the cost of producing green hydrogen. And the first plant is now being built to be running from 2024. This is an interesting technology to follow because it produces hydrogen in stage 1 and then switches the electrolyte in the water and produces oxygen in stage 2. And these things are built as cells so that you can continuously produce both gases. And it's a really interesting approach because from an energy efficiency, it takes traditional electrolysis of around 75–80% energy efficiency up to 97%.
Oh, okay.
So this is worth following, and it's really interesting.
So I think the space will see a lot of engineering, because I saw something with Masdar in Abu Dhabi, so that they're capturing the carbon dioxide of this room via the AC duct, converting it to methane, and then pulling out hydrogen again out of that. So, okay, so I'm just told that the minister is joining us, is taking another 10 to 15 minutes. So we'll continue with that original steel discussion. Over to you, Tim. Help give us some insights into what is happening in the rest of Europe and the world, how you see the world stainless perspective. What are the learnings that India can take from that? What is India doing right? What needs to be fine-tuned? Fine. I'll hand over the stage to you, and if the minister comes in between, we might request
interrupt it. Yeah, I'll do my presentation.
Fine. Yes, thank you. Mr. Jindal, there are a couple of questions. Maybe till the time that happens, we can address them.
Hi, Abhyudaji. Good morning. Always nice to interact with you. Just I want to know, sir, we have been reading some reports that the production of stainless steel in India is going to almost grow at a double, almost a 9% CAGR rate in the next 5 to 6 years. So where do you see these capacities coming in? Are there going to be brownfield expansions or greenfield expansions? And secondly, do you see the manufacturing landscape changing in India for SS? Do you see some people moving towards nickel pig iron or other raw materials than scrap? What's your vision?
So basically, it's going to be a mix of both. You know, there is enough inherent capacity already there in our country, and most of the small scale, medium scale producers are actually operating at a 30 to 40% capacity utilization. So the way the industry is going to grow, and absolutely you're right, at 9 to 10%, we're expecting stainless steel to grow in India. And with that, looking at that scenario, it's going to be a mix of both brownfield, greenfield. All the producers, if there is some protection and there is some support that we do get from our government, then definitely all these underutilized capacities will ramp up. So that immediately will add into the stainless steel output. Plus, along with that, because we see tremendous growth coming into railways, automotive industry, ABC sector, then there will have to be greenfield expansion also. And in terms of your second question for nickel pig iron, so you know our country does not have any nickel in it. So for going for nickel pig iron production in India will not be viable. And again, with the concern of CBAM that Markus very rightly spoke about, and focus for stainless steel industry has to be scope 3. Because already all of us are almost 85 to 90% scrap users anyway. The focus has to be on ferroalloys, on scope 3. So when that comes into play, then NPI might not be the most promising technology to go for, even though it is the most lucrative in terms of costing. That is definitely, it is there. But it totally depends now where your market you're going to supply to. If your focus is going to be more domestic, more, let's say, Southeast Asia, then NPI is not a bad opportunity, a bad area, technology to jump into. But if Europe, US is going to be the focus, where the growth is there, where the demand is definitely very strong also, then I would still say working on scrap route, working on green hydrogen, working on newer technologies, renewable power would be a better bet.